Welcome to the Dogwood Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Cumby, and today we're talking about how to handle a PR disaster with our senior marketing strategist, Elizabeth Bethune. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi.
How you doing?
I am pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. So this is your first time on the podcast.
My first official Dogwood podcast.
That's
correct.
exciting.
Yes, I'm excited.
They're fun. They're
Yes.
fun. Well, I thought since this is your first one, maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell everybody about your experience and how you ended up at Dogwood.
Yeah, so my degree is actually in public relations from Auburn University. And so I have worked in other agency settings. I've worked for local nonprofits. I've worked for myself, and I've done social media management, consulting, but also PR. So helping get media coverage, writing press releases, and just really helping small businesses understand the importance of getting that publicity and not always having to pay for it, and really helping businesses put on. What they're good at, and showing that to the public. So, so I ended up here about 4 months ago now, and so I'm excited to be here at Dogwood and helping clients here with PR and social.
Yeah. So you're our senior marketing strategist.
Yes.
So that means you're kind of over that whole team and
That's right.
helping lead them. And I know when we first were looking to fill that position, Brian was like, I know this lady in the waters. And she used to do her own stuff, but I don't think she's doing it anymore. And I wonder if she would come back and do agency stuff. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds good.
Yeah, it was a total God thing. Just it was the right season, right time. And when y'all came to me and kind of told me what you're looking for, I thought it was a great fit and perfect time to do this.
Yeah, well, we've loved having you here. So
Love being here.
So today we're going to talk about public relations, but specifically how to handle kind of a PR disaster, if you will. Because I'm sure if people have not faced a PR crisis in their organization or their business yet, they probably will at some point.
At some point, right.
Yeah, and it's probably a good idea to have a plan before the storm comes.
Yes.
So first of all, for those that might not know what public relations really is, can you give like a short explainer of kind of what PR is?
Non-paid media. So basically trying to present that image that is a positive one in the community, and sharing with people what you do, but also the good things that you do as well. And so that's why it's so important to have a plan in place, because if something does happen, and whether it's on the news gets a hold of it or social media, you need to have a plan in place of how you're going to respond, because that response is going to dictate kind of your really your reputation moving forward. It's kind of a crucial point. How are you going to handle this?
Right.
And so, really what's all about just kind of putting that image out there that is a positive one, and keeps your business in a good light.
Yeah. And PR, I mean, we've talked about this before about just how much overlap there is between our social media services and our PR services and all that, because it doesn't just have to be writing press releases and reaching out to news services. It can also be the way that you write on your website and social media. And
exactly.
all the different ways that you represent yourself to the community. So when we're talking about a PR disaster, I think probably the first thing that we all kind of think about are like big scandalous things.
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily have to be what it is. Like, that's not what happens to 90% of people.
No, I mean, and a lot of times, like, these big corporations, yes, those are kind of the higher level media, the things that hit the media really quick. But, your business, there's always a potential of some negative, interaction, whether that's with a disgruntled employee, whether that's with an unsatisfied customer. And like you said, it's not just like in the media, but like social media. Like, what are you going to do with negative comments that come? Because that is just, when you put yourself out there, you are opening yourself up to that. And so having that plan in place, no matter how big or small, is something that'll help it's something you can streamline, and it won't be as big of an ordeal, as, at least internally, because you'll be prepared and know who to go to, know what to say, and how you're going to handle it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So when you're, talking about how to handle comments, like you mentioned, bad comments on social media or a bad review, why would we not just ignore it? Why is it important to actually have a response?
When it's coming about something about your business or about a product you have, to me, authenticity and just being very transparent is huge for a business. Just like in everyday life, we want people to be honest with us. We want people to be transparent and authentic. And that's the same for a business. You're not looking for somebody to cover up. You're looking for somebody who will take responsibility and who will own it and to make it right. And that to me is something that's so huge with social media, is that you can turn a negative thing into a very positive thing. Is you can take a very unsatisfied customer, address it, and make sure that they are, that's addressed, they're listened to, they're heard. I think a lot of times that's what people, that's a big thing for people.
Right.
And making sure you're doing it, making that wrong right. Sometimes it's just somebody that's unhappy and just wants to be listened to. And the times I've experienced it is when you take that approach, typically you can create a more satisfied customer, or they will take that negative review down.
Right.
And you've created probably an even more dedicated or loyal customer because of what you've been able to do and communicate through that.
Right. Yeah. And handling those situations can have such a big impact on the way you're perceived and the way people interact with you later on. I know this is a big company, but when the whole Facebook data breach thing happened, that was a big deal. Like, there are a lot of people to this day that still don't trust Facebook because they think their information's being
right. And that's a big thing about, building trust, and that's, being transparent and authentic. That's going to build that trust with people. And there was something that happened I think this was a few weeks ago with Costco.
Right.
I think there was a union formed or something. And instead of, when they took to the media, instead of blaming their workers or blaming somebody else, they took full responsibility. And, I'm personally a loyal Costco goer, and I love Costco, and like that made me want to support them and trust them even more.
Right.
And, it's just refreshing to see, especially a big corporation like that, taking ownership and saying, hey, this is on us. And we're going to look and see how we can do better in order to do better by our employees and do better overall for our business.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So if this is somebody listening that's a part of an organization and they've never really thought about how they would handle this kind of a situation, how would you encourage somebody to go about coming up with a strategy for how to handle a PR disaster that comes their way?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, really kind of getting that person or that team together and outlining who is going to be the one who is going to be that one person that's going to either communicate that via press release or talk to the media or just whoever that's going to be. You need one person. You don't need multiple people talking.
Right.
Okay. So, and just kind of streamlining that, usually there's people who write a press release, who's going to write it, who's going to write that content for you.
Right.
And just identifying who is going to take what role when and if this happens.
Right.
So I would say set up that team first and foremost.
Yeah, because there's lots of pieces that kind of go along with handling something like this, whether it's, who's handling your social media, who's writing the press release, who is like actually going to the media if they were to have an interview or, go on a news station or something like that. So having that all set up beforehand just takes some of that stress off because everybody knows what their role is.
Right. It's just one less thing to have to think through when you're in an emergency situation. And, something else to think about too is, I know not all companies, or you might have just a few people in your company, but if you do have several employees, who is going to communicate internally with your employees?
Right. Yeah.
Because the last thing I think, as far as from an employee standpoint, is you don't want to hear things on the news before you've been communicated to yourself, depending on what the situation is, of course. But, if there is something that has happened that's an external issue with the company, how do you communicate internally to your employees about what they, what the procedure is for them to do as well? Because somebody could reach out to them.
Right.
And say, hey, what's your take on this? And if they haven't been informed on how to handle this or what to do, you just never know what's going to come from that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, about the importance of spreading that. Yeah. Internal PR.
Yeah, because there's an internal piece too that you've got to make sure that your employees are versed on how to handle that as well.
For sure. All right, so you've got your team together. Everybody knows what their role is. Now what?
Right. Yeah. So you've got the roles, you've got the team, and then coming up with that strategy, and then when that happens, when and if that happens, you've got to come up with a cohesive message, and make sure that everybody is on the same page of what's being communicated, how it's going to be communicated, and honestly, what you're going to do about it.
Right.
And like we kind of talked about earlier, is just the more you can be authentic and true, taking ownership of something, I think the better it's going to be received. And that's a big thing when crafting your message is, I think some of the worst things you can do is, say no comment, or, not address something that's like one of the glaring elephants in the room, So having that cohesive message, and, another thing is, the affected parties. How are we going to identify and address that?
Yeah.
So like, again, thinking with a disgruntled employee, how are you going to handle them one-on-one? But how are you going to handle that public facing? How are you going to handle that internally? If there was a unsatisfied customer who's doing this, what is that? How are you going to reach out to them as well? And how are you going to make that right?
Yeah. I mean, this. I don't know if I've ever said this on a podcast, but I'm really big into reading. And so a lot of the publishing companies in the last year or so have had a lot of big situations going on where people have, boycotted and that kind of thing because of people being underpaid or being unfairly treated because of different, whether it's religion or their race or their gender or whatever. So there's been a lot of that going on in the reading and publishing community. And it's been interesting to see the way that they all respond, because some of them do it really well and then some of them don't do it very well. And it's interesting to see how they communicate to the different parties, because obviously them talking to the union that is upset at them is very different than them talking to me as somebody buying their book.
Right.
And sometimes the boycotts, like what the unions are asking for, are different. Like currently there's one going on where they're fine with you post or buying books from the publisher, but they would like you not to help promote it for free. Yeah. And that's part of what they've asked us as consumers to do is, hey, it's fine if you keep buying it. Sounds good, but if you could not promote it online at the moment, that would help us a lot. Right. So it's really interesting to see all of that work out and how they have to talk to their constituents and then to their employees and to the consumers.
And you've got to think about too, it's kind of made me think of different channels. Like, how are you going to communicate? Of course, we got the press release for the media, statements on Facebook, on Instagram, whatever your social media platform, emails to your, internal, their internal part of it. And so just identifying those channels too of where are you going to go and how are you going to craft that message, because the way you craft your message to the media is going to be a little differently than how you craft the message on social media.
Yeah.
But it's the same message overall, but maybe some little tweaks on how it's communicated.
Yeah. Well, and that's so important to know how you're going to say something or what points you're going to bring up. Because I know for me, I can get really emotional when it's something that, I'm very dedicated about. And so having those talking points to know what to say so that you don't,
don't go
get
off
angry
a tangent.
Or whatever it is very helpful.
Yes.
All right. So
So we've got
the storms come. It's kind of gone a little bit. You've handled it.
Yeah,
things are moving on. How long should you pay attention to it? How do you monitor it?
You just kind of, I feel like anything else, you got to ride the wave. You've got to expect there could possibly be some backlash for a little bit. And that's where you continue to, figure out how you want to respond to individual comments and making sure, that to me, again, there's an opportunity to humanize your brand and to make sure you are coming across that you are listening, you are concerned, and you are doing what you can to fix the situation. So, continuing to monitor that, but, just like with everything else, it will eventually die down. But what comes from that again is how you responded in that moment. And something to think about too that I kind of didn't mention earlier was, the timing of when you're going to present your message. You don't want to do it too quickly because you want to make sure you have your ducks in a row, but you also don't want to wait too long.
Right.
I would say if you already have a plan in place as far as who's going to do what, how you're going to craft the message, who's going to do that, you can respond within 24 hours.
Right.
It's not an immediate like, oh my gosh, it just happened, I've got to respond something immediately. But it's time, it gives you time enough to meet with your team, go ahead and move forward with, creating the content that needs to be put out, and then from there, monitoring it.
Yeah. Well, I know this was one of those topics when we were talking about podcast topics for the year. This was one that I mentioned and thought would be really good.
Yeah.
But it's not one of the fun topics that everybody wants to talk about. But I think that's valuable for people to hear the things that
for sure.
It's not the sexy topic to talk about on the podcast, but it's one that's really real and that everybody has to deal with.
And it's something that you realize it's not fun to do kind of or think about, but when and if that happens, you'll be thankful that you have that in place.
Right.
And, even if you aren't like a huge business, I think even with the social media, social media with it is how it is today, you've got to be prepared for negative comments.
Oh, yeah.
And again, how are we going to respond to that? What's our policy on that? And that's also very important to kind of have that in place with your employees too, who, how are we going to respond? What's the tone we're going to take?
Yeah.
And figuring that out for your business.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and not even necessarily for, responding to a disaster, but the place that I worked previous to this, they were very specific about the kinds of things that were okay to post and what wasn't okay.
Right.
And not in a controlling kind of way, but just in a, we were representing the company and it was a religious organization. So we were also, representing our denomination and all that kind of good stuff. And so we were asked not to share things that were overtly, divisive or things that were, super political and not that you couldn't, stand for your beliefs and that kind of thing. But in general, just, recognizing that the things that you say and the things that you post can have an impact not only on yourself and the way people see you, but the way people see who you're working for.
Right, exactly. And you got to think about that, with our agency setting, with working with clients, but then also like clients and customers, it does reflect on your business.
Yep.
And so, again, like you said, not being controlling, but kind of have an outline or something just to give to your employees to say, this is kind of what's acceptable. This is what we would recommend, and this is what will help continue to keep our business in a good light, with still kind of letting people keep their autonomy,
right? But
having kind of that outline in place to have at least give people an idea and understanding of what's going to be good for them to do on their end.
For sure. I was telling Chase this weekend that I'm so glad, as much as it annoyed me when I was a 13-year-old getting into social media and all that, as much as it annoyed me that my mom was really particular about what I could post and who I could be friends with and all that kind of good stuff. I look back and I'm so grateful that there's nothing stupid on the internet that can come back and haunt me at any point. I mean, there's cringy stuff that any 13-year-old would post. But
I have cringy stuff from 18 because I think I was about 18 when that was first hitting the scene. But yeah, you just never know when you put something out there and publicly, like what can come from that. And, that's as hard as kids, when you don't think about stuff like that, but that's something that's very important for your employees to be thinking about as well.
Yeah. Well, were there any final words that you wanted to leave us with?
I was trying to think. I think I want to just keep hitting on this point of humanize. This is another great opportunity to humanize your brand. And, as a business, you want to be as authentic and true to who you are as possible. And sometimes, unfortunately, we do make mistakes.
Right.
And there are things that are going to happen that could shed a negative light or an unhappy customer. And, looking at that as a way, instead of thinking, oh, we've got another complaining customer, looking at it as a way to you can publicly make it right. I mean, you can allow people to see who you truly are as a business by responding to those in a positive way. And or even if it's behind the scenes, reaching out and making sure you're taking care of that one, because you never know, you could be creating that loyal customer that will keep coming back, or that'll keep investing with you, or whatever that may be. There's just so much more power in that authenticity and just owning whatever it is that might have happened, and taking that responsibility, just like any human, like we expect other humans to do.
Right.
Businesses, that we are made of people, and that's what we got to do.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much that goes into all this, because talking about the behind the scenes kind of stuff, it made me think about, so I have this book subscription that I'm a part of. And so every month they send me a book that I choose. And it's really fun and great, because you get really great hardback books for really cheap, and you get to get books before they're out and support like authors and that kind of stuff. It's really fun.
That's awesome.
But so this month my book came in, and it was like a misprint. Like the jacket was huge and like bubbling off the cover, and the cover was like bent on the corner. And that's never happened before.
Right.
And it wasn't a big deal, but it was enough that I was like, that's not really cool.
Right.
But they have internal processes where you can go and just tell them like, hey, this thing happened, and like, if you could do something about it, that'd be cool. If not, like, I'm still going to read the book. It's still readable. It's not the end of the world. And so I reached out to them, and they were like, hey, we're so sorry about that. Like, I've already got a book sent your way to replace it. And if you don't mind sending us a couple pictures and letting us know, like, what condition it came in, so that we can try to avoid that in the future, then that would be awesome. And, I mean, no questions asked. Like, sent me a new book before I even proved that my book was messed up. So
that's awesome.
Doing those kind of internal things kept me from having to post anything negative,
I know. And I mean, and that's the thing. If people feel like they're not being heard by the company, they are going to figure out a way, typically, to be heard.
Right.
And that usually means going on social media and blasting the company. And so that's just something that, again, I know it's hard as a business owner when mistakes happen. We're human. People who work for us are human. But it really is an opportunity to really build that reputation. That's a big part of public relations, is you're building your reputation, and you want to build that in a positive way.
Yep.
And that's, like you said, it's not just press releases. It's how you come off and on your websites, on how you communicate on social media. And so, I mean, look at it as more of an opportunity for what, to show who your business really is.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been a fun one.
This has been fun.
I think even with it being a heavier topic, it was still a fun one.
Yes.
Well, thanks for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm sure we'll have you back on regularly.
Anytime.
Well, everybody, as we wrap up today, I just wanted to remind you to please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And if you're feeling really generous today, you could even share our podcast on your social media or leave us a review. That really helps us to get the word out to the right people so that they know about our show. And if you'd like to connect with us in other ways, the best place to do that is on our website at dogwoodmediasolutions.com. And you can find us on social media. You can use the website to send us an email, to call us, whatever works best for you. And that's the best place to connect with us if that's what you need to do. And we would love to talk to you and see if there's any ways that we can partner with you and your business or organization. So thanks for tuning in to the Dogwood Podcast. And until next time, happy marketing.